This video is going to be about the end of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles, which led to World War II, basically. So, after World War I, President Wilson represented the United States in the negotiations at the treaty at the at the Palace of Versailles in France. And he was there along with all the leaders of the other countries, except for the losers. Germany was not invited until the end. Austria wasn't invited. Ottoman Empire was not invited, all until the end when they had to sign the surrender papers, which is the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, Wilson walks in and he says, "Guys, I have it all thought out. Okay, I've got 14 points." And so he gave a speech, a very impassioned speech called the 14 Points, where he said, if we do these 14 different things, then we'll never have another world war. And so the people listened to them, but ultimately his plan, most of it was rejected, and it was not done as he would have rolled it out. And this might have led to World War II. It's one of the factors that might have led to that. The whole peace talks at first was about getting an honorable finish to this and moving everybody forward, but eventually it all shifts and it becomes about punishing Germany for what they had done, making Germany pay for the entire war. Alright, the purpose was to try to eliminate the causes of all wars by promoting freedom of the seas, reducing weapons, that's the arms race, and removing economic barriers like tariffs. So basically make the world a much friendlier place for everybody to make money in. The 14 points promoted self-determination. That means you have the right to have your own territory and government. Every country should have that right according to Wilson. Okay? Alright, President Wilson intended his 14-point plan to prevent future wars. That is the big takeaway from that one. The name of the treaty that ends World War I is called the Treaty of Versailles. This is where it was actually signed. And by the way, there have been many, many treaties of Versailles. This is the Treaty of Versailles of 1919. So that's how you can tell it. By the way, if they talk about the Treaty of Versailles on your LEAP test, trust me, folks, they're talking about this one. They're not talking about one that happened 20 years before or anything like that. When people say Treaty of Versailles, they mean the one that ended World War I. Allies demanded that Germany sign the war guilt clause and admit that they were the sole cause of World War I, which became a major reason for World War II. So Germany was forced to pay $80 billion in today's money. It's actually probably closer to $1 trillion, but anyway. Moving on, President Wilson failed to recognize that England and France wanted reparations or payments from Germany and revenge. England and France obtained mandates or temporary colonies from the treaty. Most of these are going to be in the Middle East. This right here, folks, is what screwed up the Middle East for a long time. We always hear about war in the Middle East, and it's because what they did after World War I is they took the Ottoman Empire and they carved it up into pieces, and the victors took the pieces. And when they carved up the lines, they didn't have any consideration as for the culture of the people. So you would put two groups in one country that hate each other. And that's why there's always fighting in the Middle East, especially over Israel. Alright, the League of Nations. Okay, one of the 14 points was Wilson said that we should have a League of Nations, a friendship of nations, if you will. And everybody should join. We should get everybody in the world to join this. And the more people we have in the League of Nations, the less likely it is to actually be attacked by somebody that's not in the League of Nations. Now, Wilson, unfortunately, he has a problem. Congress is the only body in our government, according to the Constitution, that's allowed to sign treaties. And so Wilson creates the League of Nations. America's supposed to be the leader of the League of Nations, the big superpower, but our Congress actually rejects the League of Nations. We're going to get to that story in a minute. Alright, so the League of Nations organization, Switzerland is its headquarters. It has a council. That's the executive organization. We got these countries on it: England, France, U.S., Italy, Japan. Okay. While the League of Nations failed in its mission of preventing war, we had World War II, it did succeed in making the world aware of major social problems. See, one of the biggest reasons why people go to war, and I'm talking like 95% of all wars, is because you got something that I want. So I'm going to go and conquer your territory and take it from you. Okay? What if we would make everybody in the world better? And what I mean by that is, let's make sure everybody has enough clean drinking water. Let's make sure everybody has enough food, has enough access to medical care at a reasonable price. And the more you do stuff like that in every country in the world, the less and less likely war is going to be. Okay? So, they failed to include Germany in the League of Nations and the USSR at the time. Aggressor nations could be punished with economic sanctions. That means that we're going to cut off trade to these aggressive nations. But the term aggressor was not adequately defined. So later on, when Hitler tries this, we're going to have a little bit of trouble enforcing the League of Nations on Hitler. The Council required a unanimous vote, and enforcement provisions were inadequate. Okay? So basically, in order for them to make any decision at all members of the League of Nations had to sign off on it. They had to say yes, which makes this a very useless and ineffective council. Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, let's talk about him. Okay? So the war is over. Everybody in Europe is signing up for the League of Nations. Okay? Now Wilson, the guy who came up with the idea, has to go back to his own country, the United States of America, and ask Congress if we can join the League of Nations. So he goes to the Senate, and one of our famous senators, Henry Cabot Lodge, he stood up and said, "So, Mr. President, what you mean to tell me is if one country attacks the League of Nations, then all of us are going to be involved in World War II." And Wilson said, "Well, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be." He said, "Mr. President, forgive me, but I don't want to be sucked into another European war, and nobody else does either." So they voted down, okay? Wilson is very upset about this, and he goes on a cross-country speaking tour on the back of a railroad car to bring the message of the League of Nations to the people. And after about 30 days of being on the road, giving 5 or 6 speeches a day from the back of a train car, President Wilson had a very bad, debilitating stroke. Now, the vice president did not want to take over. He did not want to be the president. So they got Edith Wilson, which is his wife, to be the president, the acting president, illegally during a time period called the Petticoat Presidency. And she finished out Wilson's term. We never joined the League of Nations, folks, and it might have led to World War II. Might be one of the things that led to World War II. All right, here we go, y'all. Blank had the goal of protecting the independence of large and small countries after World War I. That is the League of Nations for sure, okay? That is the purpose of it. All right, why did Henry Cabot Lodge, the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, object to the Treaty of Versailles? Let's see. Moving on here. Yes, C. He feared that the treaty would draw America into a future European war. Okay? All right, 24. After World War I, the U.S. returned to isolationism. This resulted in the country, let's see, opening up new borders to immigrants? No. Imposing higher tariffs on foreign goods? Maybe. Joining major international organizations? No, we didn't get to join the League of Nations. Making diplomacy, I'm guessing it's B, folks. All right, if we're going to isolate ourselves, that means we want Americans to buy American goods, and we're going to raise tariffs on foreign goods, which means that there will be less interactions with other countries, especially with trade. All right, during the 1920s, the League of Nations was severely weakened by which factor? Well, let's see. The U.S. refused to join the League of Nations. That's pretty important. They were supposed to be the leaders. Okay? All right, next one. Although the League of Nations failed its primary mission of preventing war, it succeeded in a number of other aspects. Which example is one way the League of Nations succeeded? Well, they made the world aware of social problems, things like slavery, things like people not having enough to eat, having enough water, and things like that. So that's pretty much the end, y'all. The League of Nations and the Treaty of Versailles was a bad treaty. The League of Nations was too weak. And Germany got disrespected because they had to pay for the whole war. Italy got no land because they were originally on the side of the Central Powers. And Japan, even though they fought on our side, they got nothing in the end. So these three are going to come back 20 years later, and they're going to start World War II together as part of the Axis powers.